Hey, folks, thank you for joining me in these phenomenally dystopian Mad Max on a bad day times. Thanks for being here. Because Mad Max on a good day, that's still not great. Thanks for being here. I'm going to get into this ridiculously Orwellian move that is slowly like some sort of seeping virus taking over our online news sources and trying to make sure that independent media is not something that exists in our world. That they're trying to make sure that your only available outlets are those which agree with the U.S. empire's narrative, the Western news narrative of what the world is and how it works and who are the good guys and the bad guys. And I'm going to get into that. There are new updates about it. If you've already heard talk of Newsguard and what they're doing, I have new information on that. So this is not just the same old story. I'm also going to get into the truly impressive, truly impressive, truly jaw-dropping number of police killings this past year. The police, our United States police, have really outdone themselves this past year. I'm going to get into that, and also how the mainstream media, despite talking about that number of deaths, is mainly wrong about that number of deaths. So I'm going to get into that. I'm also going to get into an anniversary that you're going to want to hear about. This is the anniversary of something very special. So I'm going to get into all those stories and more. Thanks for joining me. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the thumbs up. That's the only way I'm able to keep doing this. Please leave a comment. Even if your comment is, I don't like commenting. even something like that will help the algorithm gods. But all right, so Newsguard. Now, some of you might have heard discussion of Newsguard before. I'm just going to give a quick run through of what it is because I'm not trying to just rehash old material here. Newsguard is this incredibly nefarious, disgusting, insipid, Pentagon-backed organization that is trying to make sure that you and people like you will not continue to watch shows like this or read from some of the best independent outlets on the web. Now, how do they do that? Well, Mint Press, who I work for with Most Censored News, and I hope you have been enjoying Most Censored News. Mint Press wrote about it a bit back, a couple of years ago. And this is Whitney Webb talking about it. She says, Mint Press news editor Manar, Manar's changed her name to Adley. So Manar Adley recently wrote, Mint Press was informed that it was under review by an organization called Newsguard Technologies, which described itself to Mint Press as simply a news rating agency. Yeah, that's nice, right? Oh, news rating agency. Yeah, give you a good. We'll give you the little sticker of the grapes, scratch and sniff. And it says, you're doing a great job of giving us the news. And so you try and get that grape from the news rating agency. So that's how they describe themselves. And they asked Manar, the editor of Mint Press, they asked her to comment on a series of allegations, several of which were blatantly untrue. So we're going to see more of this in a second. But they send these allegations to people that are basically like, so why did you fuck that goat? And you go, well, I didn't fuck a goat. And then they go, but you're saying that, so then they run with the headline, so Lee Camp denies fucking goat. And then they're like, everybody's like, so you're saying there was something going on with a goat, right? Because you took the time to answer the question. However, to continue for the article, further examination of this organization reveals that it is funded and deeply connected to the U.S. government, neoconservatives, and powerful moneyed interests, all of whom have been working overtime since the 2016 election to silence dissent to American forever wars and corporate-led oligarchy. More troubling still, Newsguard, by virtue of its deep connections to government in Silicon Valley, is lobbying to have its rankings of news sites installed by default on computers in U.S. public libraries, schools, and universities, as well as on smartphones and computers sold in the U.S. And some of this has taken place. This article's from a couple years ago, and some of this has already taken place. In that I believe it is already installed on many public library computers, and many other entities, organizations have agreed to have it installed. I don't know if it yet comes pre-installed on any computers that you just buy online or you buy somehow. Hopefully not, but that's what they're working towards. And in a minute, I'll get into just how horrific this thing is. Because I know it's easy to think like, well, if my computer came and it said, hey, we're Newsguard, I would just say, yeah, go fuck yourself. It's more complicated than that. Okay, so that's the entity that we're talking about here. And again, that part is from a couple of years ago. So here is the update. Not only have they begun having themselves already pre-installed on public library computers, and other organizations have them installed on their computers. And what it does is it will give a site a red rating if it has fake news, and it's like a red exclamation point, and then it'll say next to it, known for having false information or something like that, or a green rating, which means it is good and it's trustworthy and everything. Now, one thing to know is the entities, the outlets that they have already given red ratings to are almost exclusively anti-war, independent outlets that are willing to reveal U.S. lies. Now, that doesn't mean that I assume they've done it to some far-right outlets as well, not ones I go to, but the thing that unites all these outlets, so I'm not saying the far-right outlets are correct about everything. They print a lot of garbage. But the thing that connects all of these outlets, including independent outlets that tend towards the left and independent outlets that tend towards the right, is they're mainly anti-war and are willing to reveal, for example, the truth in Ukraine, what's actually going on in Ukraine. And they give those things red ratings. Now, what do they give green ratings to? All mainstream media, everything. CNN, MSNBC, NPR, Fox News. If you are mainstream media, you get a big, shiny thumbs up. Now, here's the thing. Even if you are not that informed on media, you think CNN does a pretty good job, even if you're not that bright on media, you still know Fox News is a pile of shit, right? Like, and if you think Fox News is good, you still know CNN's a pile of shit, right? So even if you were far less informed on media and independent media than you should be, you would still know by the green rating next to CNN and the green rating next to MSNBC and the green rating next to Fox News that this thing, Newsguard, is a pile of steaming refuse. Just like hit you in the face as you walk in the room. Oh God. I mean, that's really all you need to know is that it gave a green rating to all mainstream media outlets. But of course, they're getting a green rating for being fawning courtesans of the empire, of the U.S. propaganda. Now, here is another update of how nefarious this is and how pervasive it's becoming, is that it's not just the outlets. So I think that a lot of people, especially more informed people, may think, well, if I Google something and it says, oh, this outlet has a red dot next to it, I'll judge for myself. But it gets more complicated than that, because they have taken the next step of scaring outlets. Many of them may be independent, but they may kind of be more middle of the road independent, scaring those outlets into removing anti-war voices. And this has already, anti-war voices speaking the truth. And this has already happened to someone who I don't know him, but I've used his articles probably on 2 or 3 previous live streams, because he does good analysis of particularly Ukraine, but what's going on across Europe in these backfiring sanctions, what the U.S. is doing, forcing the deindustrialization of Europe, forcing European nations back into feudal system of vassal states underneath the United States in this proxy war and this splitting of the global economies. He's covered that kind of thing. Sounds pretty important, right? His name is Eric Zuis, or Zuisi. I don't know how he pronounces it. And now this article of his detailing of what's happened to him is published at the Duran because he has already been removed from, I think, his main outlet, the one that I used to get his stuff at, called Modern Diplomacy. Now, Modern Diplomacy often publishes good stuff, such as his articles. But this one he had to publish at the Duran because Modern Diplomacy won't work with him anymore. Titled Censorship Prohibits Spreading Truth and Demands Spreading Lies. And you're welcome to look up the full article. There's a ton in here that I'm not going into. He goes back to Bush's WMD lies and things like that. But as I'll get to in a minute, he actually reveals the emails that are being sent by Newsguard to outlets in order to purge anti-war, anti-empire voices. And by anti-war and anti-empire, these are people speaking the truth. That's what they are. But anyway, he says, back in around 2014, 43 international news media were publishing my articles. So this guy used to be published by 43 different outlets. He'd send them to every outlet and they would publish them. Some of them were mainstream liberal media, some were mainstream conservative, and others were libertarian. But the vast majority were non-mainstream. When Obama, in February 2014, perpetrated a coup in Ukraine, it was a U.S. supported and crafted coup in Ukraine called the Maidan coup, and installed a rabidly anti-Russian government there on Russia's border, and that was instead reported as if it had been a democratic revolution, which it had not been. He says, at that time, I started writing about Ukraine, and then those 43 international news sites gradually whittled themselves down to only 7. So basically, even without Newsguard, these mainstream outlets dropped him. Or he said many of them were not mainstream, but they were, I guess, closer, more middle of the road. And they dropped him because he was publishing the truth about Ukraine. So he's down to 7 outlets that are willing to publish his work. Yet none of them ever alleged that anything in any of my articles was false, and they asked me, nor asked me to prove it true. But they were instead getting pressure from Google and from the FBI and from other establishment U.S. entities, and were afraid of being forced out of business. The site Modern Diplomacy, which has been an excellent international affairs news site, and included writers from all across the international affairs news spectrum, was basically the last to drop him. They just dropped him recently. And he publishes here the emails initially from his boss at Modern Diplomacy. So the first email is, Dear Eric, do you know who these guys are? And he links to Newsguard. They sent me an email with allegations mentioning your articles as false claims, and Modern Diplomacy is a pro-Kremlin propaganda website due to these false claims. So he's asking, then he doesn't get a response. So Eric Zuisi takes it upon himself to email Newsguard and try and get a response. He says, please explain to me why your organization has sent this email. As you can see here, you have made the webmaster worried for their site, which I don't know if you should tell Newsguard. Congratulations, you're having success at this fucking garbage, but whatever. It seems to me that there are 2 reasonable types of responses that you can give me and him as to why you sent this email. Either you will cite falsehoods in one or more of my articles, but of course you could also do that regarding any edition of the New York Times and Washington Post. So why would that be a reason? Or else you can search to find such falsehoods, find that there are none, ask your employee why he or she is terrorizing that webmaster, and essentially indirectly threatening me. Now, this is a important point, that even if they found something that was inaccurate in this guy's articles. I obviously haven't read all of his articles. I've read probably 5 of them, and I find his analysis generally very good. But even if they were able to find an inaccuracy or something that they view as incorrect, and even if I agreed, even if I was like, oh yeah, okay, he got that wrong. Yeah, that's not something that anyone should be excited about. But New York Times gets shit wrong all the time. They had 2 retractions in their article about me. Okay. And that was 2 retractions. The entire attack piece was full of lies and falsehoods and everything. But I got them to retract 2 things in an article about a fucking comedian. I mean, if you can't get a single article about a comedian correct, then what the fuck? But of course, New York Times also said Hitler was a great guy. I have done extensive pieces on that on my podcast, Government Secrets. If you want to go back and listen to how the New York Times supported Hitler, it called him one of the best political leaders in the world at one point, leading up to World War II. Within World War II, they barely ever mentioned the Holocaust, even as everyone was realizing that it was happening and it was true. And then when they did mention the Holocaust, which was something like 6 articles through the entire World War II, when they did mention it, they almost never said the word Jews. They never mentioned that the Jews were being killed in the Holocaust. This is the New York Times, which had a Jewish publisher at the time, but clearly some sort of self-hating Jewish publisher or something who didn't want people to know. And they completely ignored the Holocaust. They thought they even leading into World War II, they continued to talk about Hitler as if he was a wonderful political leader. This is all from the New York Times. Of course, WMD in Iraq. So my point is just that if you were to mark with a red X every site that has ever gotten anything wrong, got anything incorrect, then you would have red marks next to every journalism or publication outlet that has ever existed, with one exception: WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks is the only publisher, only outlet that I have ever heard of never getting a single thing wrong, because they aren't actually speaking. They aren't reporting. They are showing the emails and the other forms of documentation, and it's all been proven to be absolutely accurate and absolutely real. And not once have they been proven to have published anything false. But other than WikiLeaks, putting them aside because they are so perfect that you can't expect to live up to that. Other than WikiLeaks, you would have red X's next to everything that's ever existed. So there's that point, along with the fact that when you actually look at what Newsguard is accusing these people of, the actual points that they make, they're not actually wrong. They're not actually incorrect. So then he doesn't get a reply from his editor at Modern Diplomacy, who he had known for a long time and obviously respected. Eventually, the guy responds and says, I decided to stop publishing your articles, at least for a while, and see how it goes. Part of my decision was, of course, the threats. So you're seeing that Newsguard is getting their way, even in circumstances that are not about just putting a red X or a red exclamation or whatever the fuck they're putting on people's sites, or when you do a Google search, the red thing pops up or stuff like that. Now, the truth is, because Newsguard is in cahoots with Silicon Valley, with Atlantic Council, with the Pentagon, because this is all one big entity, the truth is, if you Google something and Newsguard has rated it red or whatever, it's not going to come up highly in Google. Of course, these outlets like Mint Press, who I work for, Consortium News, who I'm about to go to in a moment, Gray Zone, so many others, they have already been killed by Google. Google already puts all those sites, page 5 or some shit like that. The stuff you'd have to leave a trail of breadcrumbs to ever find your way out of page 5 of Google. Over 80% of people who ever search on Google, every search, never get past the first page. They just decide to click on one of the things on the front page. So by putting these sources on the second page of Google or the fifth page, you're decreasing the traffic by 60, 70%, which is what these outlets have said. That's even before Newsguard. But that wasn't enough. Killing independent outlets to that level was not enough. So Newsguard is the next step. And the next step is putting red X's next to these outlets. So even if you type into Google, if you were to have Newsguard on your computer and type into Google, Mint Press, Lee Camp, to find my articles, you would get a red X next to the result. So it would do that. Now that's if you type in Mint Press, but most people don't do that, right? Most people just type in how many bombs has the U.S. dropped? Now, if you read my article on how many bombs the U.S. dropped, you're going to get a far different view of things than if you read the New York Times article on how many bombs the U.S. dropped, which says they've all been great and they've been bombs of freedom. Really, they're freedom bombs mainly. So Modern Diplomacy, the editor there, admitted that he has stopped publishing Eric Zuis because Newsguard threatened him. Newsguard said to him, "Why are you publishing this pro-Kremlin writer who has these inaccuracies or misinformation?" Now, what Newsguard views as misinformation, because they are connected to the Pentagon, connected to the State Department, etc., is anything that goes against U.S. empire, anything that reveals that truth. So eventually, the guy at Modern Diplomacy gives Eric Zuis the email from Modern Diplomacy to show what they actually said to him. Here's what they said to the editor. This is what Newsguard said to Modern Diplomacy. "We found that Modern Diplomacy articles often link to sites rated as unreliable by Newsguard." Keep in mind, Fox News, highly reliable. New York Times, Washington Post, all very reliable. "We find Modern Diplomacy links to sites rated unreliable by Newsguard for promoting false information, such as," and then they list some sites, including this one, the Duran. They list some sites, and then they say the site also republished articles from sites such as The Gray Zone, rated unfavorably by Newsguard for repeatedly publishing false claims about the Russia-Ukraine war and Syrian chemical attacks. By the way, folks, Gray Zone reporting, absolutely accurate. Aaron Monte has been writing for the Gray Zone, and Aaron Monte is one of the few who revealed the actual bullshit behind the Syrian chemical attacks. Since Aaron began doing that, and he did it on a regular basis, four whistleblowers have come forward from the Organization to Prohibit Chemical Weapons, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, known as the most syllables in all of chemical weapon analysis. That was very important to them when they founded their organization, was to make sure they really out-syllabled everyone else. It shows how legit they are. So 4 whistleblowers have come forward to reveal that their reports were changed or altered, taking out their analysis, their ultimate conclusions, showing that the chemical weapons attacks in Syria were either non-conclusive or didn't happen at all. Meaning which is understandable because they were useful propaganda tools. The so-called rebels in Syria, which the U.S. aligned with, right? The U.S. aligned with the rebels, the so-called moderate rebels, which included things like al-Nusra, an al-Qaeda affiliate, true terrorists. So they basically they would set up things that look like chemical attacks, and then the U.S. would run around and say, "Oh, there's a chemical attack, so we got to bomb Syria," and it was useful to them. Now, there's been 4 whistleblowers. There's also been other excellent coverage by the renowned journalist Seymour Hersh. He wasn't allowed to be published in the U.S. media, so he published it ultimately in German media. Robert Schiff, I believe his name is, another well-known journalist, and John Pilger. All of them have revealed the truth in one form or another about the white helmets someone mentioned, yes, and the chemical weapons in Syria. So Newsguard is saying that's fake news. all of that legitimate journalism, all of these OPCW whistleblowers coming forward, all fake news because it goes against the U.S. propaganda narrative. So they email they email Modern Diplomacy. They say, why you continue having this guy on your staff? And they say, could you comment why Modern Diplomacy republishes or links to sites which consistently promote false claims? There's the why did you have you that's the people say it's famously the have you stopped beating your wife question. Basically you're in a position where you have to go, have I wait what? And it catches you up. Man stutters before answering why has he stopped beating his wife? How long have you been beating your wife, or things like that? These questions meant to catch you up because they're not really questions. They're a statement within a question. Like if I were to ask these people at Newsguard one question, it'd be, is it tough to celebrate Christmas as a sociopath? Or Hanukkah? Because, within the question is the understanding that they're a sociopath. So, all right. So they say, we also found Modern Diplomacy has repeatedly published false and misleading claims about the Russia-Ukraine war. For example, in June, the article titled, Have Europeans Been Profoundly Deceived? Claims to provide evidence that a coup occurred in Ukraine during February 2014 under the cover of pro-EU demonstrations that the U.S. government had been organizing ever since at least June 2011. That's absolutely true. And there's fucking video, you twat bags, you dick helmets. There is video of people, of John McCain and others meeting with the Azov Battalion and others in Ukraine before the 2014 coup. So this is 2013, and saying, we're going to give you everything you need for this fight. There's video of them being in Ukraine, meeting with these partially neo-Nazi forces or Nazi forces, and saying, we're here for you. There's leaked audio tapes of Victoria Nuland telling on the phone internally who they're going to put in as president of Ukraine following the coup. I mean, that's how insane this shit is. All right, so I want to jump to Consortium News. Consortium News is another great outlet, and they've done a good job reporting on Newsguard and the attack by Newsguard. But I hope you're seeing here that not only is Newsguard harming these sites, because if someone searches for them, there's a red check there or whatever, a red mark, and says it's misinformation, but it's also getting journalists and comedian journalists like myself removed from sites. So it wouldn't surprise me if some of the sites that I write for, I haven't been able to do a lot of writing recently because I've been doing so many live streams and the most censored news and interviews. By the way, Stella Assange / Stella Morris, she goes by both, I think. Stella Assange, Julian Assange's wife. I'll be talking to her tomorrow live. I know it's early because she's in England, but I'll be talking to her on a live stream tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern. And you can obviously watch it after the fact. So if you don't want to get up that early, I understand. But I will be talking to her live, 8 a.m. Eastern at youtube.com/behindtheheadlines. Now, I know you're like, why is there another page for your shit, Lee? And it's because Behind the Headlines is Mint Press's video platform, their video projects. So I make my stuff for Mint Press at Behind the Headlines. So youtube.com/behindtheheadlines is where I'll be talking to Stella Assange tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern for the hour. I hope you will at least watch later if you can't make the live version. But all right. So I was in the middle of a sentence where I was going to say they're getting people like me and other journalists removed from sites. And what I was going to say is when I do write, which I haven't as much chance to do, It's often republished on Sheer Post, Counterpunch, Mint Press, of course. I used to write for Consortium News, Truth Dig before they kicked out me and Chris Hedges, Popular Resistance. Now, luckily, I know Sheer Post, Robert Sheer, and Popular Resistance, Margaret Flowers, are so hardcore and so fucking smart and brilliant people that they are not going to remove me because they get this attack from Newsguard. If Newsguard were to email them and say, why are you publishing this liar, Lee Camp? However, some of the other sources in the past or present that republish my stuff very well could be influenced by it. Either they think, oh my God, what if Lee Camp is misinformation? But more accurately, I don't think they think that. More accurately, what they think is, I don't think Lee Camp is saying anything incorrect. In fact, I'm pretty sure he's saying everything correct. However, I don't want to risk it. I don't want Newsguard putting a red cross on my site and getting it further down in the Google algorithm. And so I'm not going to, so I'm going to remove his stuff just to be safe. As the editor of Modern Diplomacy said in his email, I'm going to remove you and see how it goes. So not only did the guy stop publishing Eric Zuis's articles, he also removed all of his past articles. Everything the guy had ever done has been deleted from that site. It's digital book burning. And it was done to me with youtube.com/redacted tonight. That used to be our main YouTube channel, 250,000 subscribers, everything gone, everything banned globally. Every video that ever existed there, over 2,000 videos, all gone. Digital book burning. But all right, I want to show you something that Consortium News, it says, who's been doing great work also on this Newsguard dystopian hell circus. So this is actually an extensive article. It's a great article read, but most of it is about the influence of neo-Nazism in Ukraine. And Joe Lauria is just going through in a very deep way everything that's gone on with Nazism in Ukraine. And it's a pretty great read. So, but then he says, from the start of 2013-2014 events in Ukraine, Consortium News founder Robert Perry and other writers began providing the evidence Newsguard says doesn't exist, reporting extensively on the coup and the influential role of Ukraine's neo-Nazis. At the time, corporate media also reported on the essential part neo-Nazis played in the coup. So back in 2014, you even have New York Times calling the Azov Battalion neo-Nazis, a far-right Nazi outfit. Nowadays, the New York Times is celebrating these Nazis and saying they're no longer Nazis. Nowadays, you have fucking Jon Stewart on stage at the Warrior Games giving a gold medal to a guy with a swastika tattooed on his elbow. That's how far this shit has gotten. But so Newsguard claims it doesn't exist. By the way, this is a photo montage. Pretty incredible. A photo montage of collage of the neo-fascist leader Ole Chanbach meeting with, here's one of him meeting with McCain, on stage with McCain. This is not just a quiet little meeting, on stage with McCain. Here's one giving him giving his Sig Heil. Here's one of him meeting with Biden. And here's one of him with Victoria Nuland. This is a guy who Sig Heils on stage. So it's kind of tough to deny that. But yet Newsguard is saying, oh no, there's no Nazi influence. And if you say there's Nazi influence, we will harangue sites into not publishing any more of your work. In its charge against Consortium News for publishing false content about neo-Nazis in Ukraine, Newsguard's Zach Fishman wrote, there isn't evidence that Nazism has a substantial influence in Ukraine. Oh, really? Really? Radical far-right groups in Ukraine do represent a threat to democratic development of Ukraine, according to the 2018 Freedom House report. But it also stated that far-right extremists have a poor political representation in Ukraine and no plausible path to power. For example, in the 2019 elections, the far-right nationalists, Svoboda, I can't say Ukrainian words, won 2.2% of the vote. Now, this is something they go to a lot, is they say, oh, look, the Nazi actually only got 2% of the vote. But as Consortium News points out, this argument of focusing on elections results has been dismissed by a number of mainstream sources, not least of which the Atlantic Council, which hilariously is also part and parcel of Newsguard. So the Atlantic Council in their report said that most, in their 2019 article, a writer for the Atlantic Council said, to be clear, far-right parties like Svoboda perform poorly in Ukraine's polls and elections, and Ukrainians evidence no desire to be ruled by them. But this argument is a bit of a red herring. It's not extremist electoral prospects that should concern Ukraine's friends, but rather the state's unwillingness or inability to confront violent groups in their impunity. Whether this is done to a continuing sense of indebtedness to some of the groups for fighting the Russians or fear they might turn on the state itself is a real problem. And we do no service to Ukraine by sweeping it under the rug. Now, that's the difference between an Atlantic Council report and what they do behind the scenes. So the Atlantic Council report is telling the truth about Ukraine, which is these Nazis don't have a lot of electoral wins in Ukraine, but they threaten and control a lot of what goes on in Ukraine. You see, Zelensky has bodyguards with Nazi emblems on their backs and on their bags. And many of these politicians feel threatened to the point that they know they will be killed if they go against these Nazis. And so they just give in to what the Nazis want. So Consortium then goes on to say, the Atlantic Council is not the only anti-Russian outlet that recognizes the dangerous power of the neo-fascist groups in Ukraine. Bellingcat, which, by the way, if you've seen even a thing from Bellingcat, it's like reading a report from the FBI. Bellingcat is it is basically the U.S. intelligence state laundering their reporting. So they brand launder. It's like USAID is a brand laundering of the CIA, so it appears to be an NGO. Bellingcat is the FBI pretending, and other intelligence state assets pretending to be a journalism outlet. So when you see something by Bellingcat, you should just read that as the FBI says. Don't read it as like real news. Which, of course, I'm sure Newsguard gives Bellingcat a green thumbs up. The Atlantic Council is not Bellingcat published an alarming 2018 article headlined Ukrainian far-right fighters, white supremacists trained by major European security firm. NATO has also trained the Azov regiment, directly linking the U.S. with far-right Ukrainian extremists. The Hill reported in 2017, the reality of neo-Nazis in Ukraine is far from Kremlin propaganda. So many of these mainstream outlets have had like a moment where they admit that these Nazis are running things or running a lot of things in Ukraine. But that moment is past. And now they're all celebrating the Azov battalion and everything else because it facilitates U.S. propaganda. It facilitates U.S. proxy war. So now all of a sudden the Nazis are our friends. Yay. All right, I do want to move on to a news story, but I hope I have made the point that Newsguard isn't just making outlets have a little bad branding next to them. It is getting journalists removed from the few outlets that will still report the truth, which is horrific. Some, and some of you may not know how to respond to this, how to deal with this. One way is you should start telling everybody you know that anything demarcated by Newsguard to ignore it. But maybe the correct way to respond is if you do see Newsguard on a computer or you see a Newsguard rating or something, you should know that red means give it a shot. If you see something with a red mark from Newsguard, it means it might be good, might be accurate. Sure, it might also be far-right lunatics, but it might be just a fucking left-wing guy who's anti-war. So perhaps it's time to start viewing Newsguard as reverse. If you see a green mark by Newsguard, that means that site is trash. Trash. Like full-on trash. Like whole trash. So, all right. I want to move on to just how many people our police in the United States have killed this past year, and it is not what your mainstream media has mentioned. Now, I'm not saying the mainstream media talks about this enough. They almost don't talk about it at all. But there are probably a few articles in the mainstream media, like The Guardian and some others, that say, oh my God, look at how many people the U.S. police have killed. But those numbers are still wrong. And I'm going to get into why. But let me take a second just real quick to say, if you feel like you're getting anything out of this, I hope you will click subscribe, click the bell icon next to subscribe. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Rumble, click follow. Also, at rumble.com/LeeCamp, you can click the red locals button. You can join my locals community. That's where I actually get to chat with people. I get to respond to comments. We do a Q&A every Friday. That's for members only. And we also have community chats where I ask questions. The question for today or yesterday, most of the questions are about, topics and news and stuff. But this one was, wow. Could I stutter on that one more? Would you like to see these live streams as a podcast? Now, some of you may know that these live streams were a podcast called Moment of Clarity. It's been banned by Spotify because I'm the most censored comedian in America, but it did exist until November. I've stopped updating it since November because it's more work, and I wanted to see if people care. If you want to see a podcast of these live streams, because it would help you be able to listen more. And if that's the case, you can go answer at leecamp.net, which forwards you to my locals page. So I hope you'll become a member over there and join up. All right. Also talking to Stella Assange tomorrow at 8 a.m., right? 8 a.m. Eastern at youtube.com/behind the headlines. I hope you will join us, even if you miss it. The hour with Stella Assange, I hope you will watch it later at youtube.com/behind the headlines. You can click subscribe, click the bell. All right. This is from Common Dreams, which Common Dreams they're another one of these outlets, often does good work. Some of the times they fall too much into the Republicans and Democrats are different things, which they're not. I got news for you. They're all funded by the same shitheads. Oh, so bad. So I'm sorry, folks. They're all funded by the same shitheads. Go back and watch my last live stream. I went through all the funding behind Kevin McCarthy, the new Speaker of the House. And a couple of weeks before that, I went through all the funding of Hakeem Jeffries, the new leader of the Democrats in the House. Same garbage. Okay, so, but for the most part, Common Dreams often does good work. So this is another one of these outlets where if Newsguard were to say, stop publishing these journalists, A, B, and C, because, they had the temerity, had the nerve to say there's Nazis in Ukraine. I don't know. I don't know the people at Common Dreams. They very well might stop publishing those authors because they don't want to risk it. But anyway, this is not related to that. What are we doing wrong? U.S. police killed a record number of people in 2022. Nearly 3 years after the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis sparked worldwide protests demanding far-reaching reforms to stop law enforcement agents. Oh, by the way, in a minute, I'm going to Rumble. I totally forgot. Going to rumble.com/LeeCamp. So the rest of this stream in a second will just be at rumble.com/LeeCamp. Completely free to keep watching over there, but rumble.com/LeeCamp. Again, free to watch over there. I hope you will join me over there in a minute. But all right. Far-reaching reforms to stop law enforcement agents from perpetrating violence against the communities they're meant to protect. New data shows 2022 was the deadliest year on record for people who had police encounters in the United States. At least 1,176 people were killed by police this past year in America. Keep in mind, the number of people killed by police in a lot of European countries is like 3 per year, or sometimes 7 per year. In the case of Iceland, it's 0. Ever. Like Iceland's cops have like never killed someone since they started keeping those records in like the 70s. 0 ever. Now, I get Iceland is far smaller than the United States, but still, even so, it's not 0 smaller. However, this number, 1,176, is wrong. I repeat, if you see this number anywhere, it is wrong. And Common Dreams is smart enough to know it's wrong. And where did Common Dreams find out it's wrong? From a tweet by this fella named Lee Camp. Yes, for one of these rare moments, I get to brag. Common Dreams actually gets the number right because this journalist at Common Dreams saw my tweet about how the number's wrong. My tweet said, according to the Lancet medical journal, the number of Americans killed by police is actually double the official number every year. So that means 2022 saw closer to 2,400 murders by U.S. police. That's 6.4 killings a day. The way Common Dreams phrased it, they say, as researchers showed in a study published in the Lancet last year or 2 years ago, about half of the killings by law enforcement agents go unreported. They go unreported as police killings. They go reported as a death, but not a police killing. So the true number of people killed by police last year may be double the figure reported by mapping police violence. Not maybe, is. It's actually, I think the Lancet shows it's actually slightly over double, usually. Now, you can't know for sure because, as we're saying, these are not reported as police deaths. These are people who were killed by police. Let's say they were tased to death, which happens fairly often. Let's say they were strangled to death, like in the George Floyd case, except the reason we know what happened to George Floyd is because we watched it on a video. Now, if there'd been no video there, if that had happened in a dark alley, they very well might have said, we approached this man who was looking violent and mean, and when we told him to put his hands behind his back, he had a heart attack. And then the medical coroner goes, oh, yeah, he had a heart attack. And they write down heart attack, and it doesn't go down as a police killing. That's why this number is actually double. Thank God Common Dreams had this guy here, Lee. I don't know whether it's pronounced Comp or Camp. But thank goodness they noticed that tweet by that fella. Otherwise, they would not have known that it's actually double. Hey, everybody, join me at rumble.com/Lee Camp. That's where we're going to continue this stream. So